that person who's an administrator, part of their training has been, they've been told, if you suspend a minority, specifically a Black child, that's the equivalent to slavery.
And what this is only going to create more racism, really. It really is. Because I worked in Compton. One of my first teaching jobs was in Compton, and I took over for actually, it's just, I have so many great experiences, and I just realized God has given me some experiences. Yeah. Like, it was a white teacher. It was an after school program. Those kids ran her over. Yeah. Ran her over. And she was such a sweet lady. I took over her classroom. She had these beautiful mosaics, and like, you can tell she really wanted to create this like amazing learning experience for these kids, you know, and they worked that. She quit in 2 months, you know. And did that give her a better taste in her mouth for working with Black kids? I'm sure she probably hasn't worked with them ever again. And I came in there and I whipped those kids in shape. And by the end, I had this one girl that looked at me and she was like, I'm not doing this. Pardon my French. She was 4th grader. I'm not doing this shit. That's what she said to me. Yeah. That was one of the first things she said to me. Beautiful little girl. And you could tell she had a hard life. She already had wrinkles like around her. Like, and I was just like, how does a 4th grader have wrinkles already? You know, and I rarely met the parents. And when I did, they would, you know, some of them were definite crackheads. I mean, that's the best way to put it. We were right behind the projects. Our school was right behind the projects, and it looked like a fortress, a literal fortress. And we would have to have lockdowns often because the police would go to the project to arrest someone, and they would try to run into the school. Yeah. And so, like I said, like this idea that we're not holding our kids accountable to their behavior is only going to make things worse. Right. I was strict with those kids. And that same girl who said, I'm not going to do this or whatever she said to me. Well, that's what she said to me. But by the end, when I had to leave, because my grandma actually had to leave a month before the school year ended, because my grandma was passing away and I wanted to be with her last, you know, few days, and I had to quit. And she was crying and saying I was the best teacher she ever had, you know? And like, she rose to the standards. Like, structure. I gave them structure. I gave them little bucks. Every time they came, I gave them little fake money, and like, we had a bank, and like, it was, you know, I was teaching them, like, and I remember they would come up to me and be like, I still remember what you taught me yesterday. And they even the principal would go to the kids and talk to them, and the kids would be like, I'm sorry, Mrs. I forget her name, Mrs. K or whatever her name was. We have to go to our after school program. If we're late, we don't get our $1. Like, you know, they would like interrupt the principal and be like, we have to go. Like, so awesome. These kids, they can be some of the most studious, smart, artistic, wonderful, like just strong people I could, you know, even in Compton, if they have the right kind of message given to them.
And go to the cultures that are thriving in America, the immigrant cultures that are thriving in America, the Indians, the Asians, so forth. Not all, but right. And what do they do? Do they have this kind of like lower the standard stuff with their kids?
No, not even close.
No, you better act right, right? You know, you better do your homework, right? And how are they doing? Right. You know, and I point out especially the Asian culture, because there is some real history of oppression in America.
Especially in California. We had segregated schools for Asian kids. Yeah. Like, they weren't allowed. Chinese kids had their own separate schools in California. Yep. They were not allowed to go to regular.
There were internment camps for Japanese in the 40s.
I mean, it wasn't as.
It's not as bad.
Yeah, but it's still there.
Yeah, and it was very recent.
Right.
And yet, look at them today. You know, and how did that happen? And I like to point to people. I say, name a famous Asian activist. Can you name one? Yeah. Right. Right? What Asian actor, and is that how they rose up as a culture, is by some activist, not to downplay like MLK, because that was like real stuff that they did, but like this idea that they needed welfare and they needed lower expectations to rise up. No, within one generation, hard work and education, and boom, that next generation, we're all professionals. And then look at their culture. They're outperforming whites now.
In fact, California is trying to limit how many Asians get to go to college. Like, they're literally doing reverse racism right now and saying, they want to put a cap.
It's just more racism, but yeah.
Exactly.
They're trying to change the state constitution. It's called Prop 16 to allow for legal discrimination. And the Asian community is standing up against it because it's just legal discrimination, you know.